audio recorder is not that great. And also, if you step in front of this, you will be caught on camera. Gasp.
So if I climb through the window.
If you climb through the window, you will be caught on camera. All right, so today we're talking about basic survival characters, whether it's fantasy, science fiction, or regular realistic fiction or historical fiction. Generally, your characters may be thrown into a scenario where they have to run away into the wilderness to survive, or even maybe not even necessarily the wilderness. Maybe it's the suburbs, or maybe it's a city. Is like where we live here, where it's not a city, but it's also not farm town. It's somewhere in between.
It's just kind of like
It's
a town.
It's
just
in
like
the
a
middle.
town thing. Just like a small, like a town thingish.
Town thingish. Yes, not mostly farmland, but not mostly city. Somewhere in the middle. All right. So with survival tips for your characters. First, you gotta evaluate what skills your characters would innately bring to the party. So, for example, if you're in a fantasy setting, your character may have the ability to conjure fire. That's gonna be super helpful. You won't need to have your characters running around trying to find flint and steel or figure out how to fire. Exactly. Or maybe they have a magical creature that can help them out with those kinds of things. Like, if they have a magical creature, if they have magical powers, those are all going to be important. Or alternatively, maybe they're a different race. Like, let's say your thing is a science fiction and they're a robot running out into the detrimental for them. No batteries, no plasma, blood, whatever they need. Yes, question. Oh, for the table? I think that was originally because this was meant to be kind of a computer lab, so all the cords could go through there, but not really necessary anymore.
I thought they were tiny cup holders.
The teeniest cup holders. They do kind of look like tiny cup holders. I love
that.
I want now. Yeah, they used to even have a little lid on it, so you could only fit a certain amount of wires, and then the lids just kept popping off. So that's exciting. So they just took.
Kept on popping off. I think people kept on taking them out.
Yeah, popping off forcibly.
Yes.
But anyway, so think about what your character A needs, whether they're, for example, if they're another race that specifically only eats lava rocks and they're not in a place with lava rocks, that's going to be problematic. And then also think about what your character has as far as abilities goes. So whether they can set things on fire, whether they can create a shelter, whether they can create electricity, whether they, whatever you need. Yes, I'm familiar. So
Whether they have a Pikachu. Pikachu like fire. Pikachu
So,
charges your phone.
then keep in mind, next thing for your characters is how are they going to acquire new information? Are they going to run across someone else who's going to tell them, hey, this is how you make fire? If they don't know how to make a fire and don't have the ability to, how are they going to learn that information? How are they going to get that information?
Or books.
Or books, exactly.
Find
Find a fantasy library in the middle of nowhere. Find a random witch's cottage. Find a random mythical creature that says, hello, I'm going to help you on your journey. I don't know. Whatever you think would be most helpful. Yes, like you can have them actually get the knowledge via something else. You can have a library. There's all sorts of different ways you can go about that. But it's important you address those in advance because otherwise you might get stuck and be like, oh, well, they don't know how to make fire, so they're all going to die. And it's like, okay, well, how do we solve this problem? Let's think through this. Creatively problem solve based on what your characters do and don't already have. All right, so first we're going to talk about basic outdoor survival skills. So, first off, do your characters know how to identify whether a plant or berry or fungus is poisonous? This is incredibly important knowledge. If they don't know, then you want to make sure that you actually have that illustrated. A great example of this is in a book that I worked with as an editor called Meeting Twilight. It was one of my favorite scenes because it was at first annoyed because I was like, they just found all these berries that just so happen to be not poisonous. That's like kind of frustrating because they didn't actually know how to identify berries. So like, how would they know? And then they all immediately threw up. And I was like, oh! And so to me, it was one of the funniest things in the whole thing because I was sitting there going, they're all just like trusting these random berries they found and they have no idea how to identify whether berries are poisonous or not. Like, why? And then I'm like, oh, they're just small idiots. But anyway. But
they got lucky. Come on. Oh.
Exactly. Not so much. So keep that in mind as well. If your characters don't know how to identify poisonous plants and they're just eating random plants, how long are they going to get lucky before they eat something that's going to make them sick or die? You got to keep in mind.
Or be paralyzed.
Or be paralyzed.
Because
or
then
any
you
number.
starve. Then
Right,
you,
or
then
have
you
a
can't
terrible
get
allergic
food.
reaction and lots of hives or something. Like, there's all sorts of different things that could go wrong when it comes to poisonous plants and other things. So keep in mind, if your characters don't know anything about that kind of stuff, you are going to have to kind of play the odds a little bit and be like, how long can I get away with them being okay before I have to have consequences for them just eating random berries? All right, next.
Why do I want to eat a random berry now?
Berry. No, don't. Please don't. I'm not condoning eating random berries.
What about random mushrooms?
No, definitely not. That's so much worse. All right, so we're dealing with next what definitely they should eat. The nice thing is that most creatures you can safely identify whether or not they are poisonous to eat.
The more colorful they are, the more poisonous they probably are.
Exactly. The more colorful they are, the more dangerous they probably are. It's a lot easier than berries and things like that because there are a lot of berries that look poisonous that are identical to berries that aren't poisonous. Frustrated noises. So the nice thing is if they're outdoors and trying to survive and they don't know what to eat and how to not identify poisonous plants and they don't want to risk it, a great way of doing that is just having them purely only eat meat and like hunt rabbits and lizards and things like that and then eat those. Will it be tasty? No. Will it make them survive? Absolutely. Unless they're an idiot and pick a really poisonous lizard. Well, but that's my point. Most of the time, if you look at it and go, that's bright pink, you choose not to eat it.
Or they could just eat sticks and
Unless
leaves.
you think it's just really mean. Just because
At that
it's
point, I think at that point, you have to have your character acknowledge that they
or their Pokemon, their Pokemon goes like this.
Fair enough. Or someone else acknowledges their dumbness. All right. Next, obviously, shelter. If your character does not know how to build a shelter, the best thing they can do is look for a cave, look for a particularly nice tree. There are all sorts of trees that just like weeping willows and pine trees that will have branches that reach all the way down to the ground and make it very shelter-esque. It may not be the best shelter, but it'll do you in a pinch, you know? But if they do know how to make a shelter, make sure that you do some research on different things they could do to make a shelter. Or if they have magic, maybe they can summon a tent or cast a magic spell that is a nice shelter. Or maybe they have a magical animal that can help them find shelter. Who knows? Whatever you can come up with is good to know in advance. All right, and last but most certainly not least, when it comes to outdoor survival, water.
Wow.
So, of course, you're going to have to come up with an idea of how they're going to make the water safe, because typically you have to boil water before using it to make sure, just in case, let's say, A, there's bacteria in water, and B, there is animals and all sorts of things in that water all the time. So it's good to boil the water, no matter what. Or if you're in a science fiction universe, maybe you have one of those UV light water bottles, which works equally well. Surprisingly. Well, it doesn't work equally well. If obviously if it's like muddy water, that's probably still a terrible idea. But if it's like clearly comes from a pretty clean spring, most of the time UV light will be okay in a pinch. So if you have like fancy technology or stuff like that, or fancy magical creatures, yes, I know. Then that can be incredibly helpful. All right, now we're going to move on to suburban kind of survivalness. And when I say suburban survival skills, I just mean basically how to run away from the villains without getting caught. Because obviously there are scenarios like that too, right? Where your main character maybe was kidnapped and then they escaped from their kidnappers. Now, how are they going to stay away from their kidnappers and going to find help? It all depends on what your kidnappers are like in this specific scenario. If the kidnappers are like some sort of crazy corporate, boss, then maybe they'll have access to all the security cameras and they can trust no one and they have to sneak around, right? Or maybe if they're just your average kidnappers, then they can just run into the nearest convenience store or house and be like, please help me, I've been kidnapped. So that's a little bit easier, but obviously if you're going to go with the more complicated. Yeah, if you have a phone, though. If you've been kidnapped, you probably won't have a phone.
Or what you can do is just open the window and scream, I'm calling 911.
Please call 911 into this random house. But anyway, so those are all good things to do. We're dealing with once you have escaped. If you want me to do a lesson on like basic kidnapping escape, okay, we're getting nods. We're getting nods. Okay, I will write that down for future reference for characters. Okay, kidnapping escape techniques.
You don't learn any stuff. You learn about how to escape from kidnappers.
All right. So that way I can help break particular things that you can do. Plus, then, hey, you'll learn a good survival skill for life and death. So we'll do that next week. But
Yeah.
with basic suburban survival skills, obviously you're going to want to typically either steal food or pay with cash if you don't want people to track you. So if your character, for instance, is being tracked by the government, do not have them use a credit card under any circumstances unless they stole it. And even then, have them dump the stolen credit card as soon as possible because then they're going to start tracing that credit card because it will be reported as stolen and it will flag. And so you got to make sure that your character, if they are escaping a kidnapping where there's some sort of corporate, like big government kind of thing chasing after you, that they absolutely do not use anything that can be tracked, cash or steal things. And if you do steal things, make sure they don't see your face, obviously, because cameras. Gotta love that.
Just put on glasses.
And as far as where
What
to
if I already
stay,
have
what if I already have glasses? Put glasses on your glasses.
Exactly.
Triple glasses, they'll never see you now. No.
Or
So
if you
yeah,
have
some
glasses, just
Take off the glasses. Do
Because-
the Clark Kent Superman thing.
because a bunch of people look a lot different without their glasses.
No, it's true. Actually, it's funny. Everyone makes fun of the whole Clark Kent Superman thing, but they actually did a study once called I believe the Clark Kent Superman study, where they were like, we don't believe you. And actually, I think it was 60% of people could not actually recognize the person. Anyway, so off topic. But yes, so somehow change your appearance. If you are the classic like running from government type stuff, you drastically want to change your appearance, but not drastically in the way of like blue hair, just drastically in the way of, for instance, if their hair is long, make sure they chop it off. If their hair is short, maybe buy a long-haired wig. If their hair is bright red, they want to dye it black. Those kinds of things. So as far as those things go, you want to make sure you want to make sure that you are being as low key as possible. You don't want to like have bright purple hair. That's gonna make people immediately go, "Hi, there's a bright purple haired person," and then they might recognize your face. So keep it chill, keep it low key. And then as far as basic disguises go, you could even go as basic as wearing a hoodie because no one really thinks much of someone wearing a hoodie. Like, I mean, obviously when you're watching a movie, it looks sketchy, but when you walk down the street, do you really think every person in a hoodie is sketchy? No. Exactly. It's actually pretty normal, right?
Might just be,
I mean, unless it's 102 degrees, then you might be like, that's weird. But like, if it's fall or winter, you're probably okay.
or if it's a rainy day.
Or if it's rainy, that's fair.
Or if they were just having a bad day.
This is fair. There are some people who just want to be like hide from society, and I can understand that. All right, next thing we're going to talk about is injuries and sickness. This is more kind of like apocalypse situation, as well as like in the middle of the nowhere situation. So obviously, there are lots of medicinal plants, but if you, as we discussed earlier, it's going to be a gamble as to whether or not you're identifying the right plants, unless your character is some sort of wizard at identifying plants.
Or they have a book.
Or they have a book. And even then, sometimes it's really tricky. If there are times that I've actually tried to use a book to identify plants, and I've still had to Google it just to be safe. Like, it's hard. It is not easy. But the first thing we're going to talk about in apocalypse, for example, situation, something that might be beneficial, hopefully never for us, but you know, I'll throw it out there anyway. For your characters, if they're in an apocalyptic situation, you know, the classic like going to a grocery store isn't going to work because they have all been looted kind of thing already, you know. If you need antibiotics or medicine for your character, the best thing you can do is go to a vet clinic because 99% of people assume that if it's for dogs and cats, it doesn't work for you. That is a lie. It is at a lower dose, but it will still work for you. So you just have to take more of it than an average cat or dog in order to make it work. So will you run out of it faster? Yes, but the likelihood of a vet clinic having been looted in an apocalypse is very low. As a result of that, animal antibiotics are the best way to get antibiotics and other things like that, if that is something that you are concerned about. during an apocalyptic situation for your characters. Also, keep in mind, your characters should know how to set a broken leg. If they do not know how to set a broken leg and they're just guessing, keep in mind that they may have to chop that leg off. So be very careful with breaking your character's limbs. You
Or
may
you
have to
puppet
take
that
them. So, because if you improperly set a broken leg, it will not heal right and they will either walk with a limp or get an infection. So, you either have to pop it back into place correctly or you have to just chop the leg off. So, as a writer, keep in mind, think to yourself, how likely is it they're going to lose this leg and will that be detrimental to the plot? And if the answer is yes, maybe just have them get an average normal cut or something like that.
Or maybe just a sprain.
Or maybe just a sprain, exactly. Something nice and easier to cure with just rest. Because that's actually a funny thing about olden times is they actually used to, for broken legs, just chop off the leg because they didn't know how to set it. And so they were like, if we set it, you're just gonna walk with a limp for the rest of your life. So might as well walk with a limp and not have any gangrene. So yeah, problems. Hence why I'm like, if you don't know how to set a leg properly and pop it back into place, maybe don't break the leg in the first place. Obviously, don't have it be unrealistic if they jump from a 20-foot story building and survive. They're going to have all of their bones, if not like be dead. So you gotta have some realism, but at the same time,
Well,
keep in
they
mind.
just turn into a ghost afterwards and they don't realize.
Woo! Just starts following the party around. Hi guys. Party. Ah! All right. So keep in mind. Make sure to also keep in mind when with cuts, scrapes, and bleeding that your character should know how to do a basic tourniquet. Again, if they do not know how to do a basic tourniquet, reconsider your character's actions because they may or may not die. You got to be realistic with these kinds of things. Readers don't like reading a book where they're like, this character should have been dead 7 times, unless it's a children's book, in which case no one cares.
Unless that's just the trope that you're going for your character.
This is true, or unless you're literally just trying to make fun of death. So, those are the basics that I have for survival tips for today. I don't know much, but I do know those basic things. And so I was like, it'll probably be a pretty short lesson. Do you guys have any questions or thoughts on this topic in particular as far as writing goes for your characters? Yes, question.
Let's say, what if like a zombie? I don't know.
No, fair enough. The zombie
Like
apocalypse.
if they scratched your leg, would you have to cut it off because it could make an infection and make you turn into a zombie?
It depends on how your zombies work because all zombies work differently in every single different book that I've ever read. So if in your world zombies do spread the infection by clawing and scratching and just generalized infection-based things, then yes, I completely agree with that. But you can also make it so your zombies solely only do it through saliva or blood-based transaction kind of thing. That's typically the normal. That's why only the biting typically works, is because of the fact that the idea is it's in their saliva. And so if you don't touch their saliva or their blood, you're good. And so in that case, I would probably say no, you just have to deal with the basic infection, in which case, as I mentioned before, go loot a veterinarian place, find some antibiotics, should be okay. So the answer is you get to decide based on how your zombies work. Any other questions about survival in sci-fi, fantasy, or a post-apocalyptic universe? Bless you. If you do not, okay, cool. I was about to say if you don't have any questions, I can just stop.
So, how do you like make their resources more limited?
What do you mean by that? Are you saying they have a lot of resources and you don't know how to get rid of them, or are you saying how do you make sure they don't have resources in the first place?
Just the first one, kind of like
Okay, so like they were prepared, they have a tent, they have granola bars, and you want to make it more exciting. You want to take some things away.
yeah, because
Okay,
if they're just
If they're
they
fully
have
prepared,
a
it's
bunch of
boring.
things to
Yeah.
like
Boring. I agree. Super boring. If they're super prepared, it's super boring, right? So, with that being said, I think there are several different kinds of things you could do. You could do that in the haste of them running away, they like lost some things, or their backpack like snagged on a tree and they had to just keep running. You can do something like that. Or if they aren't running away and they already have run away and they just have a bunch of stuff with them, you could do some sort of natural disaster, or some sort of like a bear grabs their pack and drags it off because they want their granola bars or something like that. Or if you're trying to get rid of their tent or something like that, you could always do basic avalanche, mudslide, flood. Any of those kinds of things would take away their tools and ability to keep them, and they would have limited tools after that because they could only grab so much before calamity strikes. Same thing, honestly, with a wild animal attack. If they had some sort of like wild animal attack their stuff because they were hungry and they like wanted beef jerky or something, they might drag their pack off into the wilderness, and then they only have one backpack left with no food and just a tent. Um, so there's a variety of different things you can do as far as that goes. If you're going for fantasy explanations, you can always even go for something crazy. Like I recently, just this last weekend, rewatched, because it's a good movie, Nausicaa. If you haven't watched it, please do. It's cool. It's a Studio Ghibli movie. It's very exciting. But anyway, point being, in Nausicaa, the whole idea mold spores from this toxic forest, and that if they touch any plants that are normal plants, they will turn them into this toxic mold spore forest kind of thing. And so as a result, they have to burn anything that has mold spores on it. And so that actually makes it so their resources get more and more limited as they go, because of the fact that they keep having to burn more and more of the forest as it gets infected and things like that. So you could totally have a fantasy or science fiction explanation like that, and be like, oh no, there's mold spores all over my food now. I have to burn it all. It's no longer edible, kind of thing. So you could play around with a lot of different things, or you could even just have the classic goofy mess up where they're sitting there going like, how many granola bars left do we have, Jim? And Jim's going, what? And he ate the last granola bar. So you can also just have idiocy as well.
Okay, I'll write that down.
You could just have people be idiots, because unfortunately that can happen too.
That's something I would do.
Or if somebody the- or if somebody thought the like granola bars were the chocolate parts, they thought they weren't chocolate. And so then they threw them away.
This is fair. They could be like skeptical and be like, I thought that all those granola bars went bad because they had blue on them, and they're like, they were blueberries. Anyway, or something like that. You could totally do something like that.
Literally having to do blueberry waffles.
I love that. Oh my gosh. That was terrible, but also amazing. I definitely did that as a small where I was like, ew, why'd you give me a moldy pancake? And my mom was like, blueberries. And I was like, oh, and then I ate it.
I actually remember this one time when I was like,
So,
I remember this one time I thought that I was eating a chocolate muffin.
oh
I
no.
bit into it. I'm like, what the crap is this? It was blueberry instead.
I have been betrayed. Yeah. So, and that can happen too, where you can think something is bad purely because you expected it to be something else. I know that has happened to several people that I've heard of in the past. I know that one of my relatives had that happen, where they had a bunch of cups out on the table, and they thought they had grabbed their cup with soda in it, but they had grabbed someone else's cup with milk in it, and so they were obviously like, my soda has gone bad! And it's like, no, that was just Joey's cup, and it was milk. But anyway.
Or they were drinking chocolate milk, but they mistaken it for somebody else's coffee.
Exactly, like all sorts of things can happen.
Coffee.
And you're like, this tastes terrible. Exactly. Like it's important to keep in mind that those kinds of things can happen. But anyway, so yes, idiocy can also cause you to lose supplies in a less dramatic manner. However, then you also have to keep in mind that your characters may or may not punch each other. So beware. Any other questions of basic survival tips for your idiot characters who don't know how to survive? We good? Okay, cool. Then I'm going to turn off the video, but real quick before I do, I just want to give a little shout out to our 2 upcoming contests and one upcoming cool little author day thing that we're going to have. So first, obviously the Scary Story contest. All entries are due, I believe, by October sometime the first week of October. So obviously, the sooner the better.
Oh, I already
Yes.
have my scissors.
I think it's the 11th, but I'm not certain. So don't quote me on that. It might be sooner than that. So just if you get it in before October 1st, win-win. But so there's that. The word count limit is 1,500 words. It doesn't matter what font or anything you put it in because they have no stipulations on that. But keep in mind that obviously if it's in a really hard font to read, I may dock points purely just because I can't heckin' read it.
400 point font.
Me just sitting there, why?
It's 1,000
like-
pages, just one word per page, like, letter per page.
And then they died, and I'm sitting here like, why'd I read 400 pages to get here? Yeah, no, don't do that either. I mean, will I dock you a lot of points for that? No, but I will still be frustrated and therefore dock points. So if you're gonna do something crazy with the font, do something mildly crazy, not absolutely bonkers. And then as far as the contest after that, it's going to be the first chapter contest. The limit on that is 3,000 words. I know that some chapters are more than 3,000 words, but we had so many people enter last year that there's no way we could feasibly do it if we still did longer. So we literally finished the entries like the night before last year. So
How do you
want to make sure.
write chapters that long?
Yeah. It's fair. It's fair. Some people just write longer naturally in general. They just like to be verbose, which there's nothing wrong with that. It just makes it really hard when you're trying to follow word count. Moving forward. Last but most certainly not least, I know not all of you will be interested in this because obviously it's a very genre-specific thing. But on November 1st, we will be having a independently published author day. However, it will be specifically for romance authors. So if you're not interested in romance, I'm sorry, that's the theme this year. Because in the past, we've done indie author day with all different genres, and we had a bunch of people who were very confused. And so now we're just doing a different genre every year.
That
So
makes sense of why there's so many romance books up there. I'm like, oh, there's so many romance books. Ah.
But yes, so we will have that independently published author day for specifically romance authors. However, we will also have a hot cocoa bar, so trying to lure you in. Anyway, I'm going to turn off the video now, and then we can just ask any writing questions that you want. I can get you writing paper. We can do whatever you'd like as far as writing goes until 5 o'clock. Or if you have to leave earlier, that's totally fine as well. I understand. Life gets busy. But anyway, I'm going to turn off the video now. Please let me know if you have any other questions.